really smart monkey sitting behind you and just clicking buttons.
Just like school kids.
Constantly did Band-Aid solutions.
Using a PC is a whole other level of pain.
Why am I going back to this?
Hey everyone, welcome to Final Cut Pro Radio, bringing you the best Final Cut Pro professionals from around the globe. FCPRadio.com. My name is Richard Taylor, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. This is Final Cut Pro Radio episode 57. This episode is actually over an hour. We are in our third year with no breaks, no skipped months, even during the slow Final Cut Pro news cycles. We produce episodes every month, going on 3 years. As I announced recently, this is one of 2 podcasts that I have that has achieved over 1 million downloads. I produce both Final Cut Pro Radio and Final Cut Pro TV. Final Cut Pro Radio for audio interviews, and Final Cut Pro TV more for tutorials and live events. When it comes to doing audio versus video, some things are much better explained visually, like Final Cut Pro's interface. We have some Final Cut Pro TV live events coming up, so stay tuned. Follow along on Twitter at FCPRadio1, the number 1. You can join our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Final Cut Pro Radio, all one word. And on the web, of course, FCPRadio.com. We can also be found in the podcast section in iTunes or your favorite podcast aggregator. It looks like I'll be partnering once again with LumaForge to bring you live Final Cut Pro related coverage at NAB 2018. I'm looking forward to that. Last year was quite enjoyable. Last year, the live videos were watched tens of thousands of times. I live streamed Apple's announcement of over 2 million Final Cut Pro seats, and that video alone has over 8,000 views. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel, Richard Taylor TV, all one word, and you'll be notified of any Final Cut Pro related live streaming events. I've also started posting Final Cut Pro Radio shows over there on my YouTube channel. In this episode of Final Cut Pro Radio, we bring you Chris Hocking from Australia. We chat all about Final Cut Pro, the new Mac Pro, whatever that's going to be, PC versus Mac, Pegasus RAID, Mini Cheese Grater, and of course, his command post. We also have a quick drop-in from Patrick Southern of LumaForge talking about NAB and what's going on with LumaForge there. Here's Patrick, and then Chris.
Well, hey, Richard.
Well, there you are.
Everywhere you go, there you are.
LumaForge is not busy this time of year, right? They're just like relaxing, chilling out, vacationing on the beach.
Sipping mimosas, thinking about, man, what a great year last year was.
Right.
And thinking about, the future's just perfect. We're not going to have to do anything, and everything will just pan out perfectly.
Yeah.
And
you're getting paid for it, right?
I think that's pretty much how it works. Yeah, we just sit around, don't innovate, don't spend any time doing anything, and just all of a sudden, poof, business is happening.
Exactly.
Obviously, I'm being quite sarcastic. We just came out of that Apple event that, Sam had worked together with Apple for quite some time to put together. And, I'm glad that seemed to have gone very well. A lot of people seem to feel like, hey, maybe Apple actually does care about filmmakers. And we very much felt like they cared about the filmmakers when, they were providing the cameras and the computers and the software and the house and the mentorship. It was a really awesome experience. And we also just won the pitch contest at DEW, which I believe is Digital Entertainment World.
Tell me about that a little bit. What exactly was that?
More or less, it was a bunch of companies in the digital entertainment world.
Right.
Hence the name, right? And there was a pitch competition where startup companies came and kind of pitched their company as though it were to investors. And LumaForge won. Our CEO, Josh Minnie, got up there and pitched the company, and people were impressed. And we actually had a few people ask about investment afterwards. So it's pretty exciting, to say the least.
That's very exciting.
It was, for an investment crowd, they care about, how's your branding? What's your forecast? How have you done in the past? That sort of just riveting details that editors care about all the time.
Exactly. Exactly. So what do you think about if you've seen this chat we've had recently on this different Facebook groups about Apple having their own booth at NAB. What's your take on that?
I understand where people are coming from. Yeah, it would be cool to see some Apples in the middle of a show floor, some Apple computers, and to know that there were representatives from Apple that the general public could talk to.
Right.
Obviously, for us, we don't care one way or the other. We're going to represent Apple, and we're going to work with them to make sure that they're represented properly. This year, we are in the South Hall. We're going to be in the South Hall, but we're going to be in a separate conference room. So it'll be quieter than being on the show floor.
That's great.
But you won't have to walk all the way across the street, and we'll potentially have some people who weren't expecting to show up to Faster Together see, hey, there's something going on over here. So.
Absolutely. So I guess you're just getting that schedule together now. Who's going to present? You'll have information forthcoming.
Yeah, that's, and to be honest, we haven't officially decided to announce quite yet because we're still working out scheduling with speakers and so forth and so on. But if you'll remember last year, I think we were about 6 weeks out before we even thought about doing the event, right?
It's absolutely. Announce it closer, like in March.
Right. So that's when we'll start coming out with details about who's going to be there and what to expect and all that sort of a thing. But, I think Faster Together is going to be as fun, if not more fun than it was last year. So
that's excellent.
Yeah. Pretty excited about that.
So the conference room, is it about the same size as last year?
We anticipate there being around 50 seats, again, similar to last year.
Okay. And are you going to do the same kind of setup where you have a couple of cameras and a little mixing board for audio?
Yeah, we're still going to be recording each of the presentations, and they'll end up on YouTube at a later date. It's going to be similar in that regard. The big difference is where it's going to be, and we're hoping with the time frame that we've got that we'll be able to provide some new and different presentations as well that we didn't have a chance to get to last year.
Right. FCP Works announced the Apple event last night.
And we are part of that event as well. Apple and FCP Works. And I believe Ripple Training is working with us on that as well.
Yep.
Yeah, there's going to be plenty of Final Cut 10 things to do at NAB and plenty of opportunities to meet with people from Apple and to talk about Final Cut 10. We really wanted to have kind of a separate experience that feels more like you said, kind of a respite from the rest of the floor, something that's a little bit quieter,
right.
Something that is an opportunity to really focus in on interesting things that are going on within the world of post-production. Hang out at our booths on the floor and then come and hang out and Faster Together. Oh, that reminds me, Richard, I actually have a code for a free pass to the show floor for anybody who wants to go to NAB on us.
Oh, there you go. What is that code?
It is. Are you ready for it?
Yes, I am.
LV, like Las Vegas.
Right.
7382.
7382.
LV 7382.
Excellent.
Use that code on checkout for an exhibits pass, and it'll be comped by us.
And a free hot dog?
Didn't say that. Richard.
Oh, okay. Thought I'd throw that in there. So do you think they're going to show any videos, the Apple videos from the LACPUG thing? I know it's up to Apple, but have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, I still don't know any answers to that yet, but
it's possible still.
I think that there's definitely an attempt to make it happen.
Are you going to be at the Faster Together stage, or are you going to be at the LumaForge South Hall area?
Oh, me personally?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sam and I are going to be hanging out at Faster Together, and then we'll have our team hanging out at the booth. In fact, we've got a few new team members that I'm excited for everybody to get to meet. Good stuff. Richard, thanks for letting me stop by and talk to you. And
absolutely.
Have fun with the rest of the show.
Thank you, Patrick. Talk to you later.
All right, talk to you later, Richard. Thanks so much.
Yep, bye.
Richard!
Man, I'm like in the future now. Thursday morning instead of Wednesday afternoon.
Wait, doesn't that mean I'm in the future?
Well, I'm talking to the future.
Yeah. Yes, you certainly are. And the future is very warm.
It's warm?
Yeah, it's like 37, I think, today.
Celsius.
Yeah, degrees Celsius, yeah.
It's freezing here today. It's been drizzling, rain, freezing. Schools are closed. The roads are full of ice. The trees are full of ice.
So not only are you talking to the future, but we're in completely different climate.
Absolutely.
How's things?
Not too bad. Not too bad. How about yourself?
Yeah, very good.
So we'll talk about Command Post in the second half, but let's talk about just Final Cut Pro and some other things, catch up on that. We had you 6 months ago, I think, on Final Cut Pro Radio.
Yeah, lots changed since July.
Yeah. So let's talk about how are you using Final Cut Pro in your daily workflow right now, besides the Command Post?
Well, it's pretty much our tool of choice at late night. So a couple of years ago, we were all Premiere. Well, we were originally all Final Cut 7.
Right.
And Avid, and then they got to a point where Premiere finally caught up and was good enough to use on jobs, and then we switched to Premiere, and then when 10.1 came out, then we made the jump over to Final Cut, and now all our team uses Final Cut exclusively, which is pretty cool.
It absolutely is. How many people are using it right now?
Sort of all our directors do a lot of their own editing as well. So we've got 5 people in this office that will all use Final Cut.
Right.
And then one of our team, Michael Shanks, he very rarely comes into the office, but he's a dead set PC Premiere sort of guy. So he's still on Premiere. So any jobs we do where we're collaborating with him, we use Premiere.
Using Premiere is one thing. Using a PC is a whole other level of pain I'm just not interested in.
Yeah, it is pretty weird jumping because I constantly have to jump between the Mac and PC.
Right.
And the PC we've got for him's a beast. Like it's a Z820 with an M6000 GPU with 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and it's a bit of a beast. And the good thing about the HPs, like HPs are pretty similar to Macs in that, unlike if you're making like your own Hackintosh or your own little PC out of just off-the-shelf component parts, like that's where you generally run into problems with Windows and you have driver compatibility issues and stuff like that. Whereas
right.
HP sort of make a package that just works. Like they are very active over making sure all the drivers are compatible. You're sort of buying an Apple-like solution where HP have their own sort of tools that will allow you to configure your PC so that it works great with Premiere. Like they'll change all the Windows settings and they'll make sure all the drivers match stuff that they know works. So our Z820 is pretty rock solid. And we use it, like we did a job last week where we were sort of the hired post-production house for another company. So we brought the Z820 into another post house.
Right.
And we're just able to sort of bring it in, unplug the Mac Pro, plug in the Z820, plug in the Thunderbolt, and away we went. And it worked amazingly well. No crashes, no issues. And
that's good. So HP, do they have native Thunderbolt 3?
I'm not sure about Thunderbolt 3. Our one's only got a Thunderbolt 2.
Okay.
So it's got a single, it's like on a PCI card, so it has a single Thunderbolt 2 port. So we can plug in things like we have in our office, we have a lot of like Promise Pegasuses and stuff like that. So we can just easily jump that between the Mac and PC without any issues. And we actually get faster performance, ironically, on the Z820 with like the Pegasus 2 on the Z820 as opposed to the iMac. So no idea why that is, but yeah, if you run a speed test, it's slightly quicker on Windows for some reason.
Well, then what format are the RAIDs? Because can the HP read Mac OS?
Yeah, there's like you have on Macs, you've got programs. So we use Paragon.
Okay, third party.
Yeah, Mac OS sort of reading thing. And there's also Mac Drive, but we've had some issues with Mac Drive. So the Paragon tool seems really rock solid. So we can plug in any Mac drive into the Z820. It just works perfectly, which is great.
I thought the Paragon was used for Mac to read Windows. It does the opposite as well?
Yeah, both ways. So it's really handy for us because if Michael, for instance, has a drive that is formatted NTFS, we can still read that on our Macs using the Paragon software. Or if we've got Mac drives on his PC, he can still read it. And so we're sort of completely interchangeable. It doesn't really matter. And when you're in Premiere, like once you're actually editing, there's really very little difference between editing on a PC and a Mac. The actual editing process is the same. It's just all the little tricks we have, even little things like taking screenshots and stuff. Like you get that muscle memory on a Mac that when you jump to a PC, it's just like, what am I doing?
Sure. The fact that HP is making a PC that's very customized for, like you said, for drivers and stuff is really, really cool. So today we were on one of our Facebook groups, they were discussing about Apple possibly coming back to NAB Did you join in on that discussion?
NAB, I mean, it'd be freaking awesome if, because I went to NAB a couple of years ago and I was very, very fortunate and lucky to talk on the Adobe stand, which was amazing. Like, the Adobe stand is just massive and it's right in the middle of the convention center. And we had just an absolutely packed, the last session we did was absolutely packed, and we got complaints from NAB because people couldn't walk around the Adobe booth because all the roads were all blocked with people, which was pretty awesome. And if Apple did stuff like that, bringing in a bunch of idiots from Melbourne just talking about a crazy little show they did, that would be such a big game changer. And Apple could easily sort of do a similar sized booth to Adobe and just bring in some of the best sort of Final Cut talent and Logic talent and Aperture talent, or Photos talent, I guess. They don't even have to have people on the, from Apple on the ground. They could just do what Sam's doing with Faster Together, but do it ideally, Apple should just give Sam a shitload of money to do a giant booth in the middle of the thing with a white background with an Apple logo, and just do Faster Together next to Adobe.
Yeah. I don't have any problem. I mean, that would be interesting if Apple did that. I just can't see them doing that at this stage. I mean, they have 1.3 billion devices, they announced. I don't know how they can sell anymore. I mean, they're selling as much as they can, it seems like. All their devices across the board.
Yeah. I guess the annoying thing for people like us, people working in the professional film and television arena, is that if you're a freelancer, or if in our case we're occasionally doing work for other production companies or other post-production companies, the rest of the industry doesn't give a stuff about Final Cut. It's still people are just when you say Final Cut, they just assume you mean Final Cut 7. So for us, it's really challenging because it's such a hard push to use Final Cut in other sort of environments. And if, for us, we control our own destiny, and generally we're in control of our whole post-production pipeline, so we can dictate whatever the hell we want to use.
Sure.
And it doesn't matter. But for freelance editors or people that are regularly working in different facilities, you're pretty much stuck with mostly Avid or Premiere, which is sort of a bit annoying.
Do the Avid editors, do they talk about Premiere and vice versa?
Not to the same extent. I think a lot of Avid editors are also freelancers, and Premiere's sort of pretty mainstream now in that sort of world.
Right.
Most Avid editors I know would prefer to work on Avid than Premiere. But yeah, it doesn't seem, there's not as much bitching about Premiere on the Avid forums as there is in other sort of communities.
It just seems like not a lot of it, but some of the discussion is just completely petty jealousy. Whatever, it's just like school kids.
Yeah, it's just noise.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I had to do a job. I did a job for another agency the other day, and they were didn't have an editor and were sort of under the pump, and we had done previous work for them as a production company. I was like, I'll come along and help out and do a week editing for you, and didn't realize that I'd be working on a PC in their office in Premiere. But really, once you get over the initial sort of, why am I going back to this? Really, at the end of the day, if you know the tools, I can quite happily, I'll complain in my head for the first 5 minutes, but then once I'm in the zone of actually creative editing, I honestly reckon I can edit just as fast in Premiere as I can in Final Cut as I can in Avid.
Right.
And even things there's definitely advantages to all the different apps, but the way I sort of work in Premiere is very similar to the way I work in Final Cut. It's just that instead of doing everything in the browser like I would in Final Cut, I'll do sort of my selects there, I'll do it in a pancake timeline sort of view.
Right.
And because it's in a timeline, I sort of get all the same benefits as I was working in the browser. I can easily skim stuff, I can easily do markers and sort of find things. So it's sort of, even though you just have to sort of think differently about it, I guess. But in terms of the actual creative editing process, you can sort of do the same things in Premiere as you can in Final Cut in terms of smart collections. They have sort of the equivalent in Premiere, and there's all sort of workarounds. And there's some things in Premiere that I just find are faster. For example, the job we were doing the other week, we were just doing the online and visual effects for it and all the deliverables. It was a television commercial, so all the deliverables to broadcasters and stuff. And when you're sort of doing that sort of non-creative, just technical grunt work, it is sort of easier sometimes to jump into Premiere and work with tracks for audio because, I don't know, you just have, it just feels you're just in a different headspace. Whereas Final Cut, it feels like a really creative tool, and I love working it sort of like playing a piano or sort of,
Right.
like you really feel like the artist. And like when I'm doing like client attended sessions, like having Final Cut there, like I feel like I'm driving a Flame or an Autodesk Smoke. Like you want a graphic? Sure, I'll do that. You want to track this? Sure, I can do anything.
Sure.
But then when it comes to like doing just boring, making sure that there's a clapper on the front of the thing and it has to be exactly this amount of frames of black, and you need to make sure all the audio is OP59 compliant and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's just easier to do that in a really stock standard traditional track-based editor.
Well, you don't have to convince me. I love tracks for audio. That's why I use Logic.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to describe or convince a video editor, but since I came from an audio background, that's what I'm used to, and I'm much more efficient with audio in Logic, even if I'm doing 2 tracks. I just like it better.
There is something about like the feeling of it. Like even though I could do exactly the same thing in Final Cut, for some reason it just feels different. And like I'm comfortable in Premiere and Final Cut on the same tools, but for some reason when you're doing those sort of technical stuff, I think it's just, I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm used to it, but it just feels a bit different because you've got things like easy access to title safe and time code and stuff like that. You don't have to use hacks and workarounds to sort of see what the source time code is. And I feel comfortable in different tools doing different tasks.
Right. And Final Cut is not a DAW. It's not a digital audio workstation.
No. It's so close though.
Well, it's really not. If you look at, I mean, I know I'm not really telling you anything you don't know. Look at the preferences and the features that Logic has compared to Final Cut. Final Cut is skeletal compared to Logic.
Oh yeah, I honestly don't know much about Logic at all, but I've been using it a lot recently because I've been just all the command posty stuff.
Right.
I've done like all the experience we've had with Logic is when we were doing the Wizards of Oz. Michael did all the music in Logic.
Oh, he did. Okay.
Yeah, and he's not like, he knows nothing about Macs, he knows nothing about Logic, but he's a musical genius, so he was able to just jump on, instantly know what he's doing, and the music he created was just amazing. And we just had it in like the simple mode in Logic, and we were just able to do amazing things. And that's from someone who had never used a Mac and who'd never used the tools, but was able just to jump on and just start creating amazing stuff. But yeah, I've been using Logic recently, and like the menus are insane. Like,
yes,
I've been sort of playing in the MIDI stuff, and there's like, oh, I think this is the MIDI section, and then you click another one, like, oh wait, no, there's a whole nother like panel of like preferences. Like, it's not one preference, there's preferences within preferences within preferences.
Some people don't like that, but I like that fine tuning of control.
I like that you can turn it off. Like, that's the best thing. Like, if you want to be simple, you just turn off all those advanced features. And then if you want to be insane, you turn on everything. And then, yeah, if you need to find that one MIDI function, thank God you can just sort of type in the help and go whatever. Generally, you'll find what you want from the help sort of navigation.
You can turn the help on in Logic.
Yeah, having those sort of like those tech, like help overlays are pretty amazing.
But you can turn them on. So whatever you hover over, the help thing comes up.
Well, that's something that, again, the Final Cut team should steal, because especially for people new to Final Cut, like it would be helpful to have like really big handy tooltips.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of things. I mean, I like the complexity, be able to go in and just fine tune things the way I want them. And once again, turn them off if you don't need them.
Yeah.
That's fine. Keep it simpler for people who don't want that. But I like to get in there, and I wish Final Cut had more of that. As far as NAB goes, Apple likes to control the way they present their message, and NAB doesn't give them that control. NAB it's like a madhouse.
It is.
It's like everybody's running around buzzing. Let me get to here. Let me get to there. Nobody really stays at one place for very long. So, when I go there, I go for Final Cut Pro mainly, but I want to stop at the Blackmagic booth. I want to see what they're doing. Last year, I stopped at Panasonic's booth to look at the G8.5. So there are specific places I want to go. If Sony comes out with the A7S III, I want to go see that, for example.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what the benefit would be. Like, I think now that Sam's moved the Faster Together into the show floor, like, that's going to be amazing.
Yes.
But it would be even more amazing if it was Blackmagic, Adobe, Autodesk, Apple, and even if it wasn't run by Apple, it could be a sponsored by Apple sort of thing, but you move that Faster Together into like a prominent sort of section. Like the fact that like Mocha and Boris can have a show floor thing, but Apple don't. Like, that's the sort of, even if you take away Final Cut, like, why isn't Logic there? Like they should be promoting that as well. Like, it's not just about Final Cut. It's sort of, they should be pushing the pro apps as a platform.
I don't disagree. I can't see Apple doing that at this stage. If they did it, it would be fantastic. I mean, I'd like it, but I just can't see them doing it.
So hard to know. All it would take is one marketing person to go, this will be a really good idea. And like, it's not like the money's not an object.
No, money's
not a problem at all. Like, we'll just take the Blackmagic booth.
We'll just buy the whole floor for our own, But Apple, they do like having very tight control over the way they present things. And I don't think it's the team, Final Cut Pro team, as much as it is Apple corporate or whatever. There's so many layers that they have to go through.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I would have thought if they were going to be there this year, there would have been some kind of announcement by now or something in the wind. I just don't see them doing it.
Well, I think it really, like, I think what Sam and his team are doing, like, they're sort of building the foundations to get Apple back in there. Like, if Faster Together goes as well as it did last year on the show floor, like, it's just going to get, the following year will get bigger and better. And once they get to a point where there's proof that the Faster Together stage is doing really positive things and it's really professional and really slick and there's so many awesome people, like, that would be a no-brainer for Apple to take all the hard work that other people have done, like they normally do, and then just throw money at it and sort of promote it and say, yeah, they're just always a bit late to the party. And I feel like in a couple of years' time, I reckon they'll be back on the show floor, but they'll be just building upon what other people have done for them for free.
Apple's not the first. Very seldom it's the first. It waits till it gets things right. But the thing about last year was Apple was there, okay? They had their own event with FCP Works in the South Hall. It was sold out. They made their 2 million seat announcement there. Not only that, the Final Cut Pro team manned an edit station at the Super Meet. The whole time the Super Meet was, they were there on the floor. Anybody could walk up to them and talk. They had their Apple badges on. There was no big announcement, hey, Apple's over here, but it was Apple,
Yeah.
And they also came to Faster Together.
Yeah. And I mean, that's all awesome. And there's no negative to all that. But I guess the problem is that the angry Avid editor around the corner is not going to actively go out to those events, and they're not going to go, oh, there's Apple people over there, if they're just quietly in the corner without their without big Apple branding.
No, they could go to the Super Meet. I mean, I don't think Avid was on stage, but Premiere was on stage.
Yeah, I went to the Super Meet a couple of, when I went to NAB, and it was an awesome event, and
So that would be interesting if Apple did that. I can't see them doing it at this stage. I mean, whenever they do an Apple event at their campus, they have millions of live people, watching their events.
And it will probably be around the same time that they've started releasing Apple feature films and Apple,
I don't have much faith in Apple making original content. Planet of the Apps. That name is just horrible.
Yeah. I mean, but the thing is that they're throwing so much money into it, and they've got so many smart people that they've hired recently. It will be completely interesting to say because, who knows? I feel like Apple Music, they put so much money and put so many great minds behind it, but it's still a bit crap compared to Spotify and other sort of platforms.
Well, it's supposed to overtake Spotify in numbers sometime this summer, according to people that are following that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's the tricky thing with all the Apple stuff. It's not like every negative thing we can say about them, they're still making more money than anyone else. So they don't really care.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, that doesn't help Final Cut editors who want to just work in Final Cut, but they can't in other facilities because the general perception is still the same as it was when 10.0 came out.
Well, it's in some quarters it is. People that's all they know.
Yeah.
So what about the iMac Pro? Do you guys have one?
No. We've bought a Jellyfish recently, and we upgraded our LTO systems and our cameras and stuff. And the thought of buying 2 new iMac Pros is just a little bit too much money.
Well, I bought a new 2017 iMac to wait till the Mac Pro comes out. And then a couple weeks later, they had the iMac Pro on sale at this one store for $4,000, $1,000 off.
Yeah.
And I ended up paying like $3,200, $3,300 for mine. I wish I had known that was going to happen. I would have bought one of them instead.
But the interesting thing is, like, we're still on, like, our two iMacs in the office are the late 2014 Retina 5Ks. And really, like, for 90% of the work we do, like, these machines just fly. Like,
Sure.
there's no performance issues at all. Like, until you start doing either 360 stuff or even working with, like, Red stuff. Like, we work with Red and Alexas, like, pretty much exclusively. And,
Okay.
like, we don't have any issues with these Retinas, and these are much older models. Although it would be awesome to have the benefit of the iMac Pro and having native 10 gig E ports instead of having the Thunderbolt adapters would be great. Yeah, I think I'm like you. I sort of want to wait until the Mac Pro comes out to see if that comes out with an even bigger and better screen than we get with our iMacs.
I have like I said, a 2017 in front of me, and right beside it, I have a 34-inch LG monitor. So it's a 21 by 9 aspect ratio. I like that aspect ratio better.
Yeah.
For longer timelines, put windows on the side and stuff. So I'd like to get the Mac Pro and just use that monitor.
Yeah. Who knows when that will happen?
That one article that Apple has 3 new Macs coming out based on, was it benchmarks or something somebody saw? One of them's a desktop, they said.
Well, that would be very exciting if they came out with a new Mac Pro this year.
It would be. I mean, the iMac Pro to me was a no-brainer. Redoing the Mac Pro is interesting because it's, quote, modular and, quote, upgradable.
Yeah.
So that means to me a mini cheese grater.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing. Like, we're very we just think in the world of film and television, but for scientists that are using a whole lot of random PCI cards, and for developers who are developing hardware that also needs PCI cards, like, we sort of think like the reason we need PCI slots is really just because we want to put in really grunty GPUs.
Right.
But there's so many other uses for it. And really, like, I reckon, like, in terms of the Mac Pro market, like, developers would outweigh creative editors by a crazy large percentage. And developers need fast CPUs to punch out their software.
The other interesting thing is, as far as expansion, I'm sure they're going to use Thunderbolt 3 for some expansion, but from what I understand, the fastest PCIe slot is 16 times, and it's faster than Thunderbolt 3.
Yeah, correct.
So they need to either have that internally, or they have to have some other kind of port that you can, attach it.
Yeah, and they can't really do that themselves because they're relying on Intel.
Okay.
Because Thunderbolt's not an Apple technology, even though they're obviously very close to it. So unless they do a completely new thing and release their own chips.
Well, eventually, yeah, perhaps.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely see PCI slots. Probably only 1 or 2, because otherwise no one's going to buy it. If you're ignoring the film and TV world, like, the reason that there's been such an upheaval over the new Mac Pro or the current Mac Pro is because there's so many industries that need fast PCI slots for things that you just wouldn't think of. Engineering, science, people that are pushing big amounts of data that need multiple cores. Because in our world, really, the software we use isn't really optimized to use multiple CPU cores. Even things like After Effects, like the way they sort of handle multiple cores is like the most clunky, sort of silly way of doing things. They basically, behind the scenes, you sort of are running multiple versions of After Effects, and it sort of just does a frame on each different virtual application, essentially.
That's odd.
Yeah, and that's why sort of After Effects is just built on so many old technologies. But at the same time, we use it pretty much exclusively for visual effects and motion graphics-y stuff. So it's definitely an amazing tool, but yeah.
So the graphics card itself takes up one of those PCIe slots, doesn't it, typically?
Yeah. Well, graphic card, you want to run on a 16-lane slot.
So it needs another 1 or 2 empty, besides what the graphics card is.
Yeah, I mean, if you're working, if you're doing serious, like what we used to do with like cheese graters, is we'd have a PCI expansion thing, and we'd have 4 external GPUs in that to basically do all the processing in Resolve, and then you'd have your internal GPU inside the cheese grater for running the GUI. Yeah, it'll be interesting to sort of see. And a lot of colorists have now, because Blackmagic sort of made moving over to Linux just as cheap as the Mac solutions. Like, a lot of colorists using Resolve for serious high-end stuff, they're all on Linux platforms now, because you can basically have an almost like it's the only limitations of your GPUs is the hardware that you buy.
Okay.
So you can, in theory, have 20 GPUs if you have the hardware that can support it. Whereas on a Mac, we're sort of limited because there's limitations in Mac OS itself that limits how many GPUs you can use.
That's interesting. Even the form factor, I'd hope it's more industrial rather than Johnny Ivish.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if they came out with something that didn't have slots and wasn't a beast, because there'd be no benefit over the new Mac Pro to the iMac Pro.
Absolutely not. There wouldn't be any benefit at all. And also, everybody would be just pissed off again.
And they'll want to make the the Mac Pro more expensive than the iMac Pro. And the only way they can do that is make it the most beastie. Like I fully expect it to blow HP benchmarks out of the water.
Well, that'd be nice.
But who knows? It's Apple.
Who knows? We'll see it in 2018 or 2019, whatever. So what about Resolve now? Have you used that as an editor at all? Because that's what I'm real curious about.
Really? Like, I haven't seen a benefit of doing it. Like, there's lots of things that will move between Final Cut and Resolve, but I've never really had the time or the need to sort of use it exclusively as an editor. Like, we do a lot of grading in it and stuff like that, but editing, Final Cut works so well, there's no advantage to going to Resolve yet.
Well, what about Fairlight, the audio?
I haven't really used it properly. Like once you're at that sort of level where you need to go to Logic or Pro Tools or tools like that, you get a professional audio sound designer.
Sure.
Yeah. Like generally, like if we're doing the audio in house, we're going to be doing it in Final Cut because we can.
Right. So what's going on with High Sierra? There's been problems.
Yeah, it's just buggy as hell.
It still is after the updates and everything, huh?
Well, it's definitely a lot better with Final Cut.
Right.
But yeah, it's still not perfect. Like there's still lots of issues.
So it's interesting that Apple came out and said we're going to concentrate on shoring up the software that we have rather than worry about adding new features and stuff. So they're seeing it themselves, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So that's an interesting announcement from them, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a really sort of, like that's confirmation that there's big issues with High Sierra.
When I went to the FCP Creative Summit at the end of October when they announced 10.4, I upgraded to High Sierra then, but I also, when I came back, went back to Sierra. It was just, wonky, all kinds of stuff. So before I left, I made a clone of my drive. The thing was, I wasn't sure if they announced 10.4, if they would have to have High Sierra. And if it did, I didn't want to be upgrading my MacBook Pro at a hotel.
Yeah, exactly.
So I did it in advance.
Yeah, well, all our iMacs in the office are still running Sierra. All our laptops are running High Sierra. And it's completely usable.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's way more little glitchy things. Like it feels more like a Windows PC than it does a Mac. Even things like disk utility, like it just never formats a drive right the first time. You always have to do it twice. And just little weird things that there's just no polish to it. And the fact that they did all those security glitches and bugs, like,
right,
it just feels like they tried to rush something out, or the developers were too busy trying to fix iOS that they sort of forgot about Mac OS.
Well, they know where their money comes from, and of course it's from the iOS.
But even the latest iOS is sort of really way more, like at each point release it gets better, but it's still way more glitchy than it was a year ago.
The only reason I'm really on High Sierra is because I have the GH5 and I'm doing the 10-bit files. Yeah. So that seems to run better on High Sierra and Final Cut 10.4.
Yeah.
Even though I'm not actually doing the H.265 ones. I tried that for a while, but the framing is so difficult because it's a full frame. It's not a 16:9 frame. It's a full 4:3 frame. Yeah. And you got to pick your 16:9 out inside of that. There's no way to do that in the viewfinder. I mean, they don't have a 16:9 overlay. Right. I said, nah, I'm going to just do 10-bit H.264. But I see a big difference between the 8-bit and the 10-bit.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if you're pushing the grade.
I don't even do that. The colors are just more vibrant. Mark Bach on the last episode described it perfectly. He said, Would you rather color with a box of 20 crayons or a box of 100 crayons?
Yeah, I listened to that podcast before. He did a very good explanation. He's a very good speaker, that guy.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's the big benefit of Final Cut is that we can allow people far smarter than us to develop titles and generators and plugins. And yeah, that's the one thing I miss when I go to Premiere.
And one of the main areas I really like to see the team work on is proxy workflow, because that's so nice to have that. Okay, I'm doing 4K and sometimes 5K files. And when I make a proxy in Final Cut, it's 2K. Yeah. I don't want a 2K file.
And that's one of the benefits of Premiere is that you have it's annoying that you have to go out to Media Encoder to create all your proxies, but you've got complete control. You can switch it out. You can relink proxies. The back end is fantastic in Premiere. But having said that, if you just need to bash out proxies quickly, like for jobs I've done, it's far quicker for me to throw red footage into Final Cut, create proxies the Final Cut way, and then import them into Premiere than it is for Premiere to create the proxies.
Wow. So you have to go outside, like from Final Cut to Compressor, to make proxies in Premiere? I didn't realize that.
Oh, yeah, sort of. It uses basically Adobe's equivalent of Compressor. It uses Adobe Media Encoder to create the proxies. So you basically, you select all the stuff you want to make a proxy, you select a preset, and that will load it into Media Encoder, and then you can sort of render it in the background. And as each proxy is generated, then it will automatically sort of relink in Premiere.
Now, can you force relink proxies?
Yeah.
I would love to have that.
It has all the same sort of relink features as you find in just relinking normal footage in Premiere. So you can relink based on timecode, file name. You can remove the extension. It's very powerful in terms of relinking proxies, which would be very handy to have in Final Cut, because I'd love to be able to just create the proxies however the hell I want and then relink.
Absolutely.
Biggest issue with Final Cut with proxies is when you're moving between machines and proxies move locations.
Right.
Final Cut, because you've got no way to relink it unless they're in exactly the same relative folder structure, you're pretty much screwed and you'll have to create them again.
Right. Well, not only that, but sometimes you don't do anything and Final Cut says, this file's not right. I'm not going to play it.
Yeah.
I know it's right, Final Cut. Relink the damn thing. I'm telling you, I'm override, relink the damn file. I've had that happen multiple times. I didn't do anything. I just started up, closed down, started up again. And no, you did something to this file. No, I didn't. Listen to me. It's like arguing with a robot.
Yeah.
What kind of projects are you guys working on right now? TV shows or?
Yeah, we've got a couple of big projects that we're just trying to get funding for. The problem with what we want to do is just exclusively long form content, like feature films and television. But we've had so many shows in development, it just takes so long. And once you start trying to get budgets for, one of the projects we're trying to get off the ground at the moment, it's a $3 million budget. And those discussions just take a very long time and lots of lawyers and accountants and contracts. And I kind of just want to lock everyone in a room and go, all right, just give us a yes or no. You've got 3 hours to make a decision.
Exactly.
But it sort of takes 6 months to 12 months to 2 years before we get straight answers from people. So It's just very time consuming.
Absolutely. That's stuff I'm not really interested in.
Yeah. So most of our stuff this year has sort of been the way we make money day to day is corporates and advertising and music videos.
Okay.
But yeah, we're always actively trying to get all these longer form projects up, and we've always got shows in development, paid development in most cases. But yeah, it's just such a long and time consuming process, especially when you have TV broadcasters involved in development and funding bodies and stuff like that. It's just so political.
All right, let's go on to Command Post.
Command Post is basically what we're doing is we're filling in the gap that Apple has left in terms of building out an API for it. So, for example, there's no way through any sort of Apple script or Apple API to select a colorboard puck. So we basically built an application that sort of fills in all those gaps. So we sort of have complete control over the Final Cut Pro interface. And then that allows us to write scripts that build tools that do things like batch exporting and highlighting where the playhead is in the browser when you've got a giant screen full of stuff. behind the scenes, it's sort of like essentially like Automator for Final Cut. We're basically writing our own Automator scripts to do the individual functions. So there's sort of two things at play. We're sort of trying to build out an API that Apple never gave anyone. And then at the same time, we're using our own API to build out features. So like a good example is like a Blackmagic Fusion. All our scripting's done in a programming language called Lua. And Lua's really simple. I'm not a programmer. I'm not a smart person, but I can write stuff in Lua. It's sort of like if you know a little bit of HTML, a little bit of JavaScript, and you have a web browser that you can Google things, like you can make stuff happen. And Fusion uses the same technology. You can sort of do Python scripts in Fusion, but they sort of recommend using Lua. And like big facilities use that to write scripts to do crazy things with visual effects. Like it's all sort of pipeline tools. And that's what they're sort of using in the really sort of high-end sort of world. And we're sort of doing the same thing, but building it for tools like Final Cut. Yeah, so we're sort of building a framework that allows us to build tools on top of it.
Is there any performance hit?
No. As far as Final Cut is concerned, it doesn't know the difference between command post pressing a button and the user pressing a button because we're using the Apple's own accessibility framework.
See, that's an excellent way to describe it. It doesn't know the difference between command post pressing a button or the user pressing a button. That makes it very clear to me.
So yeah, there's no way, as far as I know, there's no way for command post to crash Final Cut. If Final Cut Pro crashes because you've done something in command post like batch exporting,
right,
that just means there's a bug in Final Cut. It's not, we're literally just pressing buttons and moving things in the same way that a user would do it. So there shouldn't be any performance hit.
Tell me how batch exporting works. Tell me exactly what you're doing there, because that's incredible.
Yeah, it's really handy. I know lots of people. So as of like today, I think we've had like 10,000 downloads and we've got about 600 active monthly users, and a lot of people are using the batch export tool. And it's essentially, just imagine like a monkey jumping in front of your computer. You select whatever you want in your browser, so you can select multiple clips or projects,
right,
or keyword collections or smart collections. And then you either press the shortcut key for batch export, or if you have a touch bar, you can assign a button on the touch bar, or if you've got a control surface, we support lots of different control surfaces. Batch export essentially does what a user would be doing. So, for example, if I told command post that I want to do a batch export by sending it to compressor, essentially all we're doing is selecting the first clip and then going file, export, send to compressor. And then once that works, it goes, selects the next clip, file, export, send to compressor. And the same thing with if you have a specific preset you want to use, it'll just act as if a user's doing it.
But can you select an in and out point on a clip and send that?
Yeah, well, essentially it's exactly the same as a user doing it. So if you've got in and out, it'll work exactly the same way as if you were selecting in and out point and then doing Command E and exporting it that way. So yeah.
Because that's an amazing feature.
Yeah, and it does, like, we built in a lot of smarts into it. So if I just have a look at our batch export settings, you can set a destination preset, you can set a destination folder, you can replace existing files, you can ignore missing and offline files, and in the next release you can ignore proxy files. And all those settings basically mean is that, like, for example, with the ignore missing and offline files, all it does is if the missing and offline window pops up, we just click continue. So yeah, it's essentially like a really smart monkey sitting behind you and just clicking buttons, but we build in all the smarts to do it quickly.
That's a great way to describe it because it makes complete sense to me. I didn't realize that's what you were doing.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not rocket science.
Yeah, but it is for us.
Yeah, it just does it in and out. For example, if you had a timeline of shots that you wanted to export, what you could do is just create a smart collection that only selects the clips they use in the timeline.
Right.
And then use the batch export for that. So although we don't have a feature to export from the timeline, everything the batch exporter does is from the browser. You can create smart collections, pull the clips from the timeline and do it that way.
Right. You know, just recently, one of the things I would like to see in Final Cut, amongst the many that I like to see, is I'd like to see a clip logger. So, you know, with the preference setting, you click on the clip, and that clip opens up in a timeline at the bottom that you can zoom in and out of and have much more granular control over putting, you know, ranges and markers and things.
Yeah, so like a timeline in the browser, essentially.
It would use the existing timeline space.
Right. Okay, yeah.
When you're working in a browser, the timeline's not being used.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the timeline, it wouldn't be the main storyline. It would be specifically a clip logger.
Yeah.
There's two things I don't like about logging in the browser in Final Cut. I like to have the list view with a timeline of the clip that I'm using that I can zoom in and out of.
Yeah, gotcha.
Because I can stretch it all the way across to my screen, but if it's an hour-long or 2-hour-long clip, I can't see anything.
Yeah.
I'm just playing back and listening. I want to see the waveform, where clicks are, where whatever.
Right. Because, the issue I have with the reveal in browser feature in Final Cut is that a lot of the time it doesn't work, and it really annoys me that it jumps to the event instead of just, if you've got the clip in the keyword collection, why doesn't it just do that? Or sometimes it will, you'll match reveal in browser and it will start loading every project that you have in the library for no apparent reason. And then we'll jump to the wrong clip anyway.
You're right about that. But that's why I'd like to have a clip logger, because you're not using the timeline. Why not use the timeline?
One other thing that I would really like to see, and I think I could probably build it in Command Post, but it'd be a bit of work, is that it'd be great if each individual keyword collection and smart collection had their own view settings. So, for example, projects, I only ever want to see my projects smart collection in list view. But whereas my graphics folder, I always want to see it in thumbnail view. So it'd be great if it just it would remember the view settings per collection.
Yes.
The biggest problem with Command Post is that I constantly add new stuff, and then David, who is the genius that helps me code everything,
right,
just swears and pulls his hair out and then rewrites everything that I've done to make it actually good. We do have bugs because I constantly add stuff, and anytime from someone, if it's cool, I'll be like, oh, that'd be cool, I'll just bash something out now. So I'm sort of more the Premiere sort of developer than the Apple developer, where that I would just add more menus and features because I think it's cool, rather than Apple, who will actually think and plan and plot and only release the bare minimum.
Right. They want to keep it quote unquote simple for the most part. So what's going on with we've talked about this online, about the audio caching issue, that Final Cut doesn't cache audio live or something and it causes problems with the plugins?
Yeah, so I'm no expert or I'm no programmer or engineer, but as far as I can tell, unlike Final Cut 7, if you had a crazy amount of complex audio, you could in and out and render the audio.
Okay.
Final Cut 10, as far as I can tell and looking behind the scenes and stuff, it never renders audio because it always just assumes that it can play it back in real time. And I guess with modern computers, most of the time it can play back in real time. That's not an issue.
Right.
But if you're using effects like isotope, noise removal, and complex non-real-time plugins, the computer's not fast enough to process that in real time, so it just glitches out and has issues and crashes occasionally and stuff like that.
And so that's audio caching, and that's what you're calling it?
Yeah, well, essentially, if you render a timeline, render a project,
doesn't do the audio.
Doesn't do anything to the audio. There's no caching or rendering so it just always assumes it will be able to play back the audio, which is not the case if you're using crazy plugins.
Then Logic obviously can, and the DAWs can play it back.
And bouncing's essentially like rendering, so they're writing back what they're playing back. They're essentially rendering the audio.
Okay, they are.
Yeah, which Final Cut doesn't do currently.
So why? I mean, after 6 years...
I don't know. I guess people haven't been complaining enough.
Yeah.
Because, obviously lots of people complain about isotope, but then when you speak to those poor guys, they're like, well, there's nothing. We've been trying to get answers out of Apple for years and we just have no luck.
No, I completely understand that. However, isotope, what aggravates me with them, only with Final Cut, is they say it's compatible with Final Cut.
Yeah. Somebody
emailed them and they told them in an email that they posted online that it doesn't work with Final Cut 10.
Yeah, I use isotope denoiser pretty much on every single job. And we have issues and there's occasionally glitches and stuff, but it's the best tool and I'm not going to bother sending it out to their standalone app or to Logic or anything like that. So I'm happy for Final Cut to crash a couple of times because it's still quicker for me to do it in Final Cut and close a project and reopen it than it is for me to go out to another tool.
I understand. For simple audio, I don't export out of Final Cut to Logic, but if I'm doing anything complex or longer timelines, listen, if I'm running on an hour and a half or 2 hour audio file, I'm not going to sit there and scroll by hand with it constantly in Final Cut. I'm going to take it into Logic and have it, scrolling timeline, period. I'm not going to do that.
We've seen the secret hidden preferences that turns that on. It's just never really worked. So I think they just haven't, for whatever reason. I'd say it'd be performance issues. I'd say it's probably related to all this waveform caching. The issue with our scrolling timeline is that it doesn't update the waveforms in real time when you're playing. And I feel like maybe that's part of a bigger engineering effort at some point, maybe this year, maybe next year, where they'll revamp how they do waveforms, they'll revamp how they process audio, and then that will be when the scrolling timeline finally hits.
Or they just say, okay, you get a scrolling timeline if you buy an iMac Pro or a Mac Pro.
I don't think it's hardware. I just think they never thought about it when they first engineered it, and now they need to go back and do some major engineering work, and that requires a lot of R&D and testing and making sure that they don't, when you rewrite something as big as that, you don't want to introduce new bugs and issues.
Sure, but they always do. 10.4's got bugs.
Yeah, but it's still compared to most, if you look at the release notes of Premiere and Blackmagic Resolve, they're fixing serious bugs every point release, whereas I think Apple there's bugs, but there's maybe one or two serious bugs and then a couple of obscure bugs that affect a small percentage of users that are doing really complex things.
Right.
Generally, Final Cut's pretty rock solid for from each major release. There might be a couple of little bugs and issues, but there's never been really big major problems. And the few times that they pushed out updates really, really quickly.
Right. So one of the new things that you're adding to Command Post, or you already have, is gang sync your favorite DAW to Final Cut Pro.
Yeah, that's something we've only been playing around with recently. Is basically the last couple of months I've just been playing around with MIDI stuff. And Sarah, who's one of our Final Cut users and has just been doing crazy complex, she's basically been taking what we've done and expanding it to use with other applications, because she does a lot of crazy CAD drawings, and
okay,
it's a production designer, so she's using all kinds of other tools. So she's sort of taken what we've done and added Command Post plugins for all other applications. And we've been experimenting with syncing Final Cut and Logic through MIDI. And yeah, there's a few glitches and a few performance things we need to fix up. But yeah, hopefully in a future release, we'll have that out. And what is cool about it is that there are other solutions that allow you to do it. But the way they work is you put audio clip on your Final Cut timeline, which is basically a MIDI timecode in audio form. So it's just all the beeps, bops and things, as if you were the same thing as if you plugged a headphone into a MIDI out on any sort of timecode device.
Right.
And then the way that works is a third-party program will listen to that audio, translate that into MIDI timecode, and send that to Logic. The disadvantage of that, obviously, is that then you've got a Final Cut timeline that just has one track of MIDI noise, timecode noise.
Right.
Whereas our solution, the way we're solving it, is that we basically just read the timecode in Final Cut and then generate MIDI timecode.
That's interesting.
It just sort of works.
I have reel-to-reel decks. I still have them. And I have one 16 Tascam and one 8-track Tascam. And I could sync those two up with SMPTE timecode. It would take one track, though. You had to record the SMPTE timecode on one track of each device. And they would just be rock solid.
Yeah, and that's exactly the same as what we're doing.
Okay.
It's just rather than having a reel-to-reel, we've got a Final Cut, and we're taking that timecode directly off the playhead.
Command Post, it's free.
Yes.
Is it going to continue to be free?
I'd love to work out a way to get paid so that I can spend more time doing it. We've sort of been thinking about doing a Kickstarter sort of thing or stuff like that. But yeah.
Just do a light version for free, and then if you want the other features.
Yeah, what we're thinking is maybe there's so many different ways we could tackle it, but one potential route would be that we leave all the Final Cut stuff for free, and then we do paid plugins that will still be open source, but we do add support for Logic and for Motion and for Avid Media Composer and stuff like that, and make that sort of small paid add-ons. I think the main priority at the moment is to get it really stable and get the features that we've got in there currently all rock solid, and then we look at working out how we actually turn it into a product that people can either donate money for or pay for features.
And you also have to put a mute button on Chris because he keeps adding features regardless.
That's the biggest problem we have.
Yes.
That every day I will add something new that will potentially break everything else.
Every time I turn around, I see, a new post, new features.
Yeah. Well, I'll just quickly, because when we did the last podcast, that was back in July.
Yes, it was.
That was beta 9, and now we're up to beta 21, I think, is out publicly.
Wow.
The big changes, I'll just quickly run through some of the big changes that we made since then, is that originally, back when we did the last podcast, the awesome feature in Command Post is that you can have individual shortcuts for effects, generators, transitions, stuff like that. And the way that we originally got that list of individual effects and generators and plugins and everything, we'd get our monkey back in and he would click the window, read through all the effects, click transitions, read through all the transitions, click generator, read through all the generators, stuff like that. So you sort of had to do a bit of a setup process.
Right.
And then sometime between this podcast and the last podcast, we sort of updated it. So we now just scan the file system. So we now have the ability to we just scan it the same way Final Cut does. So we read all the motion files and work out the names and stuff. So we do that all automatically and programmatically, which is a lot faster and means there's no setup. Since then, the main things we added touch bar support. We have, you can control the color board via the touch bar, which is really cool. We added Elgato Stream Deck support. So that's like a little USB device that has a bunch of physical buttons that have LED screens so you can change the icon or the text on them.
Okay.
We added tangent support. Well, you can basically assign any shortcut or menu item from Final Cut to the tangent. And that's all the tangent panels from the wave to the element to the ripple. But you can also currently control the color board, and in a future release, we're adding full color inspector support. So you'll be able to control the color wheels from the tangent, which will be very, very cool.
Yes, it will.
What else we added recently between then? And then, the big thing was sort of all the MIDI support, and we made the interface darker and slicker and more Apple-y. We added one of my favorite features, which Apple must hate, is a report bug to Apple button. So we can just press a button. It'll open up Apple's own feedback form, but it'll pre-populate all the fields.
Is that specific one? Is that like HTML doing that?
Yeah, basically you're opening up a browser and filling out the forms as if a browser was doing it. So it's Apple's own form. We're not doing anything sort of tricky. We're just using JavaScript to sort of pre-populate it, which just makes it so much easier because then you don't have to fill out all those questions that you fill out a million times before, and it'll automatically pre-populate your system spec and your RAM and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I have a button on my touch bar and on my tangent. Whenever Final Cut wigs out, I'll press a button and I can just instantly start typing what's wrong with it and press send, and that'll go to Apple, and someone probably swears and goes, "Damn, Chris, why does he keep sending us stuff?" Originally, we had a couple of different phone notification services. We added a service called Pushover so that you can send, when Final Cut finishes rendering, you can now send it to both iPhones and Android devices, which is kind of cool. So,
That's why I'm asking exactly what you guys plan on doing, because you put so much work into it.
Yeah, and I think the tangent stuff, because I'm sure Apple will get to it eventually, but from what I've heard, I don't think we're going to see tangent support tomorrow or in the next release.
I wouldn't expect them for the color board, but for the wheels, absolutely. Something.
Yeah. I think it's just hard for Apple, because then where do you draw the line? If they add in tangent support, then they probably have to talk to every other. They can't just add tangent support. They'll need to talk to all the other developers who make, or product people that make other third-party panels and add support for that. Otherwise, it's a bit weird.
Yeah, but the wheels seem like they're easier to control than the color board as far as accuracy and stuff, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It definitely makes sense to do the tangent stuff. And we've got it sort of working. It just needs some fine-tuning. But, it's pretty awesome to be able to use the color wheels on the tangent and have it control in Final Cut. It's very slick. But having said that, from an end user perspective, I'm obviously in the minority, but I still prefer the color board personally. Maybe that's because I'm not a colorist, but I guess after so many years of using the color board, I find I'll do all my sort of base corrections in the color board, and then I'll only jump to the new tools if I need something very specific.
No, that's interesting. I've never been a fan of the color board. I'm not a colorist, but it's just, can I use it? Yeah, I can. I can adjust contrast, but just tabbing back and forth between 3 different tabs, it just drives me nuts.
Yeah.
There's no reason for that. Just put them all in one here, so I just don't have to keep on tabbing.
That is interesting why they didn't do that in the update. Like why they kept the same interface for the color board, why they didn't have an option to sort of view it. Because like a lot of people especially on an iMac, you'll have the inspector go full screen height.
Right.
Why they didn't just have the 3 tabs as one underneath each other.
Yeah.
Like they sort of done that with the color wheels. Why they didn't do it with the color board, I don't understand.
I don't either. I'm really glad they left the color board, because if they had taken the color board out and just put color wheels, kind of a lot of people like the color board, that would have been another whole fiasco.
Yeah, and I think it's very telling that they sort of left the color board as the default. Like I still feel like a lot of users are going to stay with the color board. Like I said, that's me. My default is still the color board, and then I'll only jump to the other tools if I need to fix a specific color or do something a bit funky.
Yeah, I haven't used a color board since 10.4 came out, and I'm glad they have a preference that you can choose which one is the default.
Yeah, very
I'd like
handy.
to see more of that. Yep. Like spatial conform.
Yeah.
Let me get a default there instead of constantly changing stuff.
And that's something that we could add to Command Post. I'll add that to the wish list.
Yeah. The wish list, how long is that?
Let's have a quick look. So we use David, who's the genius that helped me with all the programming stuff. He put me onto GitHub, which is like a management tool for programmers. Essentially, it's where we add all our code and everything.
Right.
And currently we have 192 open issues and 490 closed issues. So still 192 things I want to get done.
Yeah,
but just not enough time.
You do have thousands of hours in this in Command Post?
I could probably tell you. Let me have a look.
It's obviously hundreds, but I wonder if you got to the point where you're thousands.
April 2016, we did 86 updates in the week of April 23rd. And in January, we did 76. So, there would be a very scary amount of hours put into doing this.
Exactly. You're going to need a Command Post monkey just to take care of, updating things.
Yeah, and we actually have added lots of little monkeys that check our code now and do idiot checks to make sure that when I'm posting stuff at 3 a.m. that I'm not doing something stupid and stuff like that. So, we've learned to communicate with programming monkeys as well as Final Cut monkeys, which is pretty cool.
It absolutely is. So where can people find Command Post?
Commandpost.io is the website.
.io, okay.
Hopefully, by the time this comes out, we'll have finished the tangent stuff, and then anyone that has a ripple or an element will be able to start using the color wheels with the tangent, which will be hopefully a bit of a game changer.
Absolutely. And where can people reach you on Twitter?
I'm Late Night Films, LATENITEFILMS.
I see you on Twitter.
Yeah, we just sort of post geeky film-related stuff.
Twitter and Facebook are completely different, the reasons I use each one of them.
Yeah, definitely. Twitter's sort of my news feed.
Yes, mine too. Yep.
And then Facebook is basically just community. Like I very rarely am on, what do you even call it, like the main timeline. I'm generally only ever in geeky Final Cut groups or post-production groups. And it's pretty amazing how you can communicate with some of the smartest people in the world about very technical and very creative things.
They're willing to help you a lot of times.
Oh, yeah. That's the best thing about not just the Final Cut community, but the post-production community in general is that everyone's always out to help each other. For
the most part, that's true. There are some grumps and trolls out there that...
Yeah, you just block them.
Yeah, exactly. I always find it humorous when, some of the different personalities conflict, let's say.
Yeah. And I'm probably the worst at that as well, because I in some of the Final Cut communities, whenever someone posts something bad about Premiere or about Avid, or especially when I was a post-production supervisor, all our shared storage was Avid, ISIS and Nexus sort of stuff. And the jellyfish that we've got under my desk is freaking amazing. So we've got under my desk, I've got the jellyfish next to a Promise Pegasus R8 II sort of thing.
Right.
And I reckon the Pegasus is slightly louder than a jellyfish, but the air conditioner in the office is far louder than both of them.
There you go.
Yeah, we've got Pegasuses for days. Like our desk over there has 4 sort of 20 terabyte Pegasus things. And yeah, that's sort of why we bought the Jellyfish, because we just have a data problem. Like we archive everything to LTO, but we've got so much back catalog of stuff that you can never keep up with the archiving.
Right.
And especially as a lot of our editors, like we'll be editing jobs on multiple machines at the same time. And then when the job's over, you've got to consolidate 3 or 4 hard drives because different people have been working on different projects, and it just becomes a data management nightmare. So having the Jellyfish now, we can have like a central place, and then we can sort of archive off to the Pegasus as our sort of nearline storage and then move it to LTO once we're done and dusted is a massive help. And the Jellyfish is basically exactly the same as hooking in a Pegasus. Like as far as our people are concerned, there's no difference between you working off a Pegasus and working off a Jellyfish, except we can now all access the same hard drive at the same time, which is very awesome.
It's absolutely awesome. And how was it set up for the Jellyfish?
I honestly think like we literally got the box, unboxed it, plugged it in, turned it on. It took like probably the slowest part was at booting up, and that only takes like a couple of minutes. And the Jellyfish app that comes with it, like you literally, there's like a setup tab and then auto setup.
Right.
And then we were done. So I reckon probably between signing the courier thing and having editing jobs in it, I reckon in all honesty, it was about 20 minutes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because it was just idiot-proof. And I've set up lots of shared storage in the past and big, serious systems, but I've never had something that was so simple. And that's simply because, like, we didn't have to go into the admin stuff. Like, it's all pre-set up. The Jellyfish app is so simple. And as long as you know which ports to plug into, and really there's only a couple of ports on the back of our Jellyfish, and It didn't really matter which ones we plug into because they were all 10 gig E. Yeah, it just literally 20 minutes, we were up and running, and it has been awesome.
Excellent. Those guys at LumaForge, they really have some magic going on there, whatever the heck they're doing.
Yeah, they've streamlined it so that you don't have to think about it. Like even with a Pegasus, like you buy a Pegasus brand new, like generally you'll need to reformat it, which means it needs to go through the initialization, which takes like 2 days, or if you've got the R8, a couple of days to actually get like to sort itself out so that it can work at full speed. What Sam and his team have done, which is freaking amazing, is that out of the box, everything's set up and working. You just need to plug in your 10 gig E cables, run the Jellyfish app, and bada bing, bada boom, you have a working system.
Yeah, exactly.
As soon as you've got more than one computer, you kind of do need one. Like it just makes life so much easier.
Right. I'll get one of these days.
Like for us, it was a really hard decision because it is a lot of money. But the problem that we have is that we just constantly did Band-Aid solutions. Like that's why we have so many promised Pegasuses in the office, because every time we run out of space, we go and buy another 20 or 25 terabyte Pegasus. But it's just a Band-Aid solution. Whereas with the Jellyfish, we can sort of grow it. And once we catch up and get all the old jobs over to LTO, we can probably sell off a lot of our old Pegasuses. And then when we run out of space on the Jellyfish, you can expand it with the SAS port so we can add more storage, or we could upgrade the hard drives in it. So now even though the initial investment was a decent amount of money, we've now got a system that will grow with us over the next many years. Whereas buying Pegasus, like it only works on one computer.
Right.
It's just not a good long-term investment as soon as you're working with more than one machine. Even if the jobs I'm doing myself, it's not necessarily that there's multiple people working on the same job at the same time. It's that I'll be moving between my laptop and the iMac, or we've got a couple of iMacs in the office. So moving between machines, it's just so much easier if everything is on a central storage.
Absolutely. Alrighty, Chris.
Thanks for the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I expect to talk to you again in another 6 months, because I'm sure there's going to be hundreds of things that you've changed between now and then.
Yeah, I'm hoping one day I'll get over to, because the annoying thing, well, not the annoying thing, but when I was in NAB a couple of years ago, I really only got to see a couple of people from the Final Cut community because I was so busy doing stuff for Adobe, talking on their stand and doing all their stuff. But luckily we were literally staying underneath the LumaForge suite, so I could sort of come up after hours and chat to Sam and stuff. So that was really nice to see them. But yeah.
I'll probably be streaming the LumaForge events, the Faster Together stage again live like I did last year, but this year with my GH5 instead of an iPhone.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, and we all very much appreciate all the people on the other side of the world. Very much appreciate everything you do of keeping us in the loop, because it is very expensive to go over there and flying over to the other side of the world to talk about geeky film tools.
No, I'm glad you guys appreciate it. All right, I'm going to get off here and do some editing on this over the next couple of days. All right, my friend.
Awesome. Good to speak to you, and yeah, chat again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, mate. See ya.
Bye. So there you have it, episode 57 of Final Cut Pro Radio with Chris Hocking from Australia. You can join our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Final Cut Pro Radio, all one word. On Twitter, at FCPRadio1, the number 1. On the web, FCPRadio.com. And of course, in iTunes podcast section, you can just do a search for Final Cut Pro Radio. There will be some upcoming Final Cut Pro TV live events. The best place to follow is on Twitter, at FCPRadio1, or you can follow me at Richard Taylor TV. So until the next show, this is Richard Taylor signing off.